Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my page 112 tag video for March 2026. This is also my Buzzwordathon video for March 2026, so if you want to go to that part of the video, click the timestamp right here. So the page 112 tag was brought to BookTube by Sean Breathes Books. It's based off of a French literary prize, wherein the long list of said prize was decided upon solely by reading page 112 of the books in contention. All of these books being novels, most novel lengths, page 112 is supposed to be past all of the polished for editors pages, where you get to the raw, real writing. And without the context of the rest of the story, technically speaking, you can only judge based on the quality of the writing. Although there are certainly ways to circumvent that, and I do it a lot, including this month when I'm thinking a lot about how I really need an audiobook to be able to slot into my March reading, because I divvy up my time pretty much 50-50 between when I can read physically versus when I can actually listen to a book, yada yada. But anyway. So what I've been doing is, ever since COVID, every month, I have been playing this game to slowly whittle down my physical unread shelves, while of course building them back up again. I take 3 handy-dandy pieces of paper out of this Books and Cats mug. These pieces of paper are titles of my books in contention, which are my acquisitions from 2025 or earlier. I pick out 3 at random, then I read page 112 with you, share my thoughts, and then ultimately pick one book to go on to my month's TBR. Or at least that is usually how I play my game. Every 4th month, I go ahead and take the runners-up from the previous 3 months and pit them against each other for a second go at the prize. This is also a nice chance for me to occasionally have an opportunity to do slightly less post-production, even though it is a shame because it's a double-edged sword, because I also do love, randomly picking out books. But now that work has been done for me. And I'm going to just go ahead and mash together all of the clips I already made and then decide ultimately on a winner. So, without further ado, let's go back into the past. My family has a long history with King Harald, Thorolf said. He killed my uncle Thorolf, who was in his service and for whom I'm named. My father made sure to make his displeasure known before he left the country. It's a good thing he was already planning on leaving before he was outlawed. Gunhild was aghast. And you came to Norway to serve a son of a man who killed your uncle? That wasn't my intention when I left home, but it's how things happened, and I don't regret it. Thorolf gave her hand a squeeze. I'm going to Iceland for the winter, for the first time since I left. I wish for you to come with me. She was glad of the darkness, so he couldn't see the dubious look on her face. When we arrive at your father's, he continued, I mean to ask him for your hand, but first I want to make sure it is what you want as well. After just one time you wish to marry me? She asked, trying to sound teasing, but her voice was tight. We just met today. Well, yesterday, but... Some couples don't even get the chance to meet before they marry, let alone lie together to see how things go in that regard. Was it really so good for you? This both surprised and pleased her. Thorolf's voice sounded a bit panicked. Was it not for you? No, it was. That's not what I meant, she said hastily. It's just, this is unexpected. You're the most remarkable person I've ever met, he said with such sincerity that she flushed at the compliment. And I've been thinking, once we return to your father's hall, he may force you to marry. At least this way you'd have a choice. You can ensure your fate before he even gets the chance to force another man upon you. Gunhild frowned at this. In her determination to get to Odni and rescue Signy, she hadn't considered her own prospects. Next summer, Hyde had meant to take Gunhild around Norway and introduce her as her successor. After that, Gunhild would have taken the name Hyde and let her mentor retire to the woods for good. Okay, so, there's some interesting stuff, I think, happening on this page. I think I just especially like, the sexual part of the conversation. It's not really what I was expecting, because it seemed like things were, gearing up for a more traditionalist view of, marriage and courtship. And, I'm pretty sure the setting is maybe, some far past, Scandinavian past. And so to have in there, wait, we just had sex. Was it good for you? Was it good for you? I don't know. I thought that was pretty, touching or, amusing to follow. It was on the heels of something that could be interesting, where Thorolf is in the service of someone. It seems shocking he would be, and I guess we're not quite sure why. I mean, at least not on this page. And also, like at the beginning, I was surprised. I'm like, I want more detail on this, but now I'm realizing by the end of it that maybe we're in the third person perspective of Gunhild, because she's the one who at the very end we go back into thinking in her head about what she actually wants to do, which again veers away from what I expected, because it seems like, he's talking about, which I guess is an assumption on his part, that, maybe we're going to a traditionalist place where her father will force her to marry, but it seems more like she has a more independent thing in mind. Well, first of all, she definitely has a goal that she wants to rescue someone, and then she seems to have a mentor she'll replace. So it seems like what she's going through is different than what Thorolf expects. So that could be intriguing as well. And maybe we'll have been following her journey throughout this time, so maybe it wouldn't be a shock to us. But it does make her an intriguing sounding character. Though I don't know, it's certainly a lot of names and so forth to put on the page, but that's sort of one of those technicalities that it would be easier to follow if we already had the context of who these people are. And I would give this some, kudos, for that, interaction between the two of them, which I thought was quite charming. Sylvie overhears Alice and Anna Carvalho discussing the clivia in the stairwell. Discussing is perhaps too strong a word. The concierge is talking volubly, while Alice just listens and nods. Walking upstairs, Sylvie encounters Madame de Cheroisy on the landing and calls Coco to heel. She knows the older woman doesn't like the dog coming too close. Not that Coco has ever shown any desire to frisk around either the judge or his wife. In his own way, he is quite as snobbish as they are. "Ah, bonjour, how are you managing with our Americans?" Madame de Cheroisy inquires, as if the tailors are a shared tribulation. So the judge's wife now thinks they are on the same side of the divide. Sylvie smiles and replies that frankly she finds them a breath of fresh air. "It doesn't derange you, having them so close?" "Not at all. It's a great comfort." "Très cozy, no doubt." Madame de Cheroisy sniffs as she goes back inside. Sylvie is amused by this reminder of one of the unspoken rules of Les Riches. Being exclusive always entails having someone to exclude. She grew up hearing about Les Riches. Her mother observed them as an anthropologist might some reclusive tribe. Returning from work at Madame Wanda's, Iwa would say, "Les Riches are a nervous people, very anxious about their fine things, but they'll hate to admit it. If a guest spills red wine on a rug, they'll shrug as if they have hundreds of abusons rolled up in the attic. But the maid knows they'll make her scrub the stain for hours." Okay, I have a bad feeling I did a lot of bad pronunciation of French just now. This one feels a lot more straightforward. It also started right after a break, so that was a lucky break, no pun intended. This definitely makes me assume it's historical fiction, maybe during an occupation, like the American occupation in France, perhaps. I don't know. Or maybe not, because there's some sort of snobbery going on from the Madame, but from our POV character, there doesn't seem to be any, or her snobbery is against the Madame and the judge that is her husband, seeing them as snobby rich people. And then there is that little bit at the very beginning about another character, I think, talking to the concierge about something, but certainly the characters aren't what necessarily grabs me here as much as actually wanting to get more of an understanding of the historical time period and the sociology going on behind it all. The day before yesterday, I was swimming in the Mediterranean off of Port Bell with Golo Man. entirely in the nude, while the others had their siesta. Fine young man, Golo. Under different circumstances, you might have been jealous. And you, too, I trust, are also well. Your students love you, and your friends keep you busy. Your bed must be full of boyfriends by now, and I can't blame you, as long as you kick them out before I get back. Have you perhaps by now settled upon one of the houses you described in your earlier letter? Whichever it is, I promise I'll love it. I'll get home to you and to it as soon as I can. For now, dear E, imagine how grateful I am to have a wife who understands the necessity and urgency of my work here, as I sincerely hope you still do. With love, as ever, your V. He blotted the letter and capped the pen. Grant, reading over his shoulder, made a noise of quiet bemusement. I hardly merit a mention, he said. Varian turned in his chair. I wrote your name twice, didn't I? Perhaps I'm not as fine a man as young Golo. Grant sat before him on the bed. They had agreed to meet for a drink on Varian's balcony, while Katznelson visited a colleague at the university. Grant and Lisbon. From some secret linguistic reserve, he'd produced a knowledge of Portuguese that had allowed him to shop for a sky-blue cravat in the manner of the local dandies. In his pocket, a silver cigarette case filled with a set of Cuban cigarillos, and a diminutive silver cutter. What could Varian have written to Eileen about Elliot Grant, the apparition who refused to disappear? Varian had nothing to hide, as regarded his own behavior. Not that he and Eileen were in the habit of hiding anything. Eileen detested ignorance above all else, and most of all her own ignorance in personal affairs. When they'd agreed early on that a cosmopolitan marriage allowed for an occasional adventure on the side, they'd also agreed to be perfectly honest. It was no secret to Eileen that he'd had liaisons with men. She tolerated them as a peculiarity of his character. But how was he to be honest with her about Grant, when Grant's presence was still a matter of consternation and confusion? Okay, well, I'll just start to say it's kind of interesting to compare this one to the last book, which was about YA romance troubles. Maybe it would be easier if, the protagonist of that story could just, have both boys, It would make it much easier if she were in a cosmopolitan relationship with her lovers. I mean, not that I really know enough about the context of that story. And anyway, to get back to this one. I'd forgotten a lot of the details other than Holocaust, but Varian Grant was an American rescuer who went abroad to Europe to try to rescue artists and such from, persecution. And I remember I read about his complicated past, maybe in an essay by Dara Horn in People Love Dead Jews, which maybe I should read again before reading this book. But yeah, as far as this is at all about his rescue missions, maybe the very end of his letter to his wife maybe alluded to it. But other than that, he mostly seems to be on some, striking romantic vacation where he can't seem to shake this guy Grant, I suppose. I mean, even I guess if you're going to have dalliances with men, maybe there's still parameters that could be crossed. Like, it kind of seems like from this exposition that he wants to be a little more casual with these relationships, and Grant might be sticking around and be a little more important than all that. And what's going to happen then when he returns home to Eileen, who he's expecting will kick all her lovers out of bed? So presumably he should do the same. I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting how, having the letter and having his lover read over his shoulder gives this opportunity for a lot of exposition where we can explain what the marriage is like and all of that. And it's definitely, I don't know, I guess I'm getting the feeling that it's going to be a really chock-full book. It's a very chunky book. I know from, the cover copy, it's going to be about some of his rescue missions, which don't, appear at all in this page. So it gives off the impression it's going to be a lot more hyper-specific about his personal life as well. There's my call back to the present. Here we are back again, and I'm ready to recap the 3 books you just heard me talk about. So my December pick was The Weaver and the Witch Queen by Genevieve Gornichek. My January pick was Haunting Paris by Mamta Chaudhry. And my February pick was The Flight Portfolio by Julie Oringer. So the first thing I'm going to do is immediately eliminate one of the books, and it's going to be Haunting Paris by Mamta Chaudhry. I do feel bad because I've played with this a handful of times, but I think I am keeping in line with the rules of my game, that I snag upon the fact that I'm less interested in the characters than I am in, the possibility of the setting. And as a character reader, that doesn't work for me as much anyway. So once again, I will be putting this book down. So that actually leaves my choice between two chunksters, which is somewhat alarming since I'm also reading for the BookTube Prize and my deadline is at the end of the month. But anyway, these two books are The Weaver and the Witch Queen and The Flight Portfolio. And I really do like the sound of The Weaver and the Witch Queen. This is sort of I think it's fantastical or fantasy based on like 1,000 years ago, Nordic history, that sort of thing. Something that's a little out of my usual, but close enough to sort of the historical inspired fantasy that I can tend to like. And then we have The Flight Portfolio, which this one I've been also playing with for a long time. And this is historical fiction around World War II, and it's particularly chronicling the life of Varian Fry, who was a man who was able to save a lot of people from the Nazis. But to go back to what I said before, I had this second niggle that I wanted to pick a book that I could find on audio, and with that being said, it means I'm finally going to go with The Flight Portfolio. In a way, this feels very apropos because I've often been putting this book aside because I've been intimidated by its length. But if I'm going to go by my audio rule, I gotta go ahead and pick it, and it does feel like a relief or a promising thing after putting it aside so many times. And also, I really did like the writing on the page. There's a lot of illuminating personal relationships at play. I mean, I think a lot of the rest of the book might talk more about his historical accomplishments, but this also promises that we'll get more into Varian as a real character who has, real relationships, and some of it has to do, I think, with being gay in a time when that would be less acceptable. So I am very excited to finally be getting to this book. And now on to the Buzzwordathon. So the Buzzwordathon is a very popular readathon put on by Kayla and Books and Lala. She's been doing it for several years. She looks at buzzy trends and titles, and then she creates 12 title prompts for us to read by for the whole year. And 2 years ago, she started with buzzy trends and covers and made some cover prompts to last the year. And that's what I decided to go with. I am attempting to fulfill all of the 2026 cover prompts, one per month. And I am using a particular huge haul that I did back mid-year last year. That is the Raid the Shelves haul. Raid the Shelves is actually an event put on by the Jewish Book Council. It's an organization upon whose website I kind of live. And every year they throw open the doors of their Manhattan offices because they get a lot of books from publishers and other means, and enough to allow, patrons to go ahead and stuff their bags full of these free books. So I've taken advantage, and I went in 2025 and I acquired over 20 books, and then I wanted to find a way to justify this extravagance by reading them, or at least a lot of them, as soon as possible. So I am slotting them into the Buzzwordathon cover picks. It's a little bit of a gamble. A lot of these books I got from the Jewish Book Council from Raid the Shelves. They are, more mainstream or literary fiction, whereas I think a lot of these cover prompts lean more towards genres, so things don't always match, but I do the best I can. I get creative where I can. And as you can see, I'm already doing well in 2026. I got my 2 books for January and February on the sheet. Huzzah! Our March prompt is to go for movement on the cover, and I actually think I have a good one for this one. This is Welcome Home, Caroline Klein by Courtney Price. And as you can see, this person definitely seems to have their hands up in the air in a woohoo motion, and is a very active pose. So, that about covers it for me now. I will leave the Goodreads links for all of these books listed down below in case you'd like more information on them, and also a link to my playlist of all of my TBR games, which mostly is the page 112 tag in this Buzzwordathon, and also I do a quarterly game that I have on there as well. And And I should be back on this channel in the near future to do the February reading wrap-up that I promised in my last AM reading video. Let's see how this goes. Hopefully you'll find it enjoyable. So thank you very much to Sean for bringing this tag to BookTube. I found it incredibly enjoyable and helpful to whittling down my physical shelves all of these years. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.